So in this video, we'll be learning how to find the surface area of a parametric equation. So first of all, what do we mean by a parametric equation? A parametric equation is any x or y in terms of t. So let's say we have x of t. So the variables are in t, and let's say we have y of t. So what I mean by this is, let's say we have x is equal to 1, or let's say 10t plus 1, and then y is equal to 3t minus 6. So that's just an example. And in our last video we covered how to find the arc length, and in this video we'll be doing the surface area. So the formula is as it follows. S, capital S, is the surface area, is equal to integration of from a to b 2 pi y, which is the function itself, radical. Now this is where it gets a bit tricky. So it's going to be x prime squared plus y prime squared, and it's going to be in terms of dt. And this one we are integrating it around the x-axis. So we have another formula which is the exact same thing, except that the function will be x. So let me just quickly write it down. So from a to b 2 pi x, so our function itself would be x. So x is equal to, let's say, 5t plus 2, or if you're given y, it will be y is equal to, this is the first one, y is equal to negative 3t or something like that. So let me just erase that, and now yeah, it's the same, everything else is the same. So x prime squared plus y prime squared dt, and we are this time integrating it in terms around the y-axis. So now let's do some examples and this will be more clear. So our first question is going to be that we are given x as cosine t and y as 1 plus sine of t, and the most important thing is the rotation. So it is x axis, and the limits are from 0 and 2 pi, and we need to find the surface area. So let's find the prime. So x prime and y prime. What is the derivative of cosine? Is going to be negative sine t, and the derivative of 1 plus sine t is going to be cosine t, because 1 just becomes 0, and then sine t, the derivative of sine t is cosine t. So let me just plug that in, and now let's write the integration. So it's going to be from 0 to 2 pi, and the formula, actually let me write the formula on the top right. So here it is, just for your reference. It's going to be 2 pi, and here we are rotating against the x-axis, so we need to plug in the y itself, and our y is 1 plus sine t. So I'm just going to write it here, 1 plus sine t, and don't forget the brackets. And now we have radical of x prime squared, which is going to be negative sine t squared is sine t squared, and cosine squared is just cosine squared. And as we know, this is our identity, which is sine squared plus cosine squared is equal to 1. So all we have here is radical 1, which is 1, and which is basically nothing. I can just remove it. We can just remove it, and we are integrating in terms of dt. So now we just need to integrate 1 plus sine t, and we can take 2 pi outside. So 2 pi, and we have the integration of 1 is t, and the integration of sine t is minus cosine t. Close the brackets, and the limits are from 0 and 2 pi, and the final answer that you would get here is 4 pi squared. Oops. Let's move on to our next example, question number 2. and we have x as ln of secant t plus tan t minus sine t. So at first, this, when you look at this, it is very overwhelming. So we will do this step by step, so you don't have to worry about that. And one thing I would tell you is that once you know the basics, everything else is very easy. So we have x and y, and then we have the limits from 0 to pi over 3, and then we are rotating against the x-axis, and we need to find the surface area. So first step again is to find the x prime. So how would you prime a ln minus sine t? So the derivative of ln is, let's say we have u, ln of u, the derivative is simply u prime over u. That's it. So here, okay, let me just minimize this and keep this on the side. So here we have, what is the derivative of secant t? That is going to be, the derivative of secant is secant t tan t, and the derivative of tan t is secant squared. So we are done with u prime here, and now over u, which is the same thing. So it's going to be secant t plus tan t, and now we are left with the derivative of sine t, which is just simply cosine t, and that's it. Now one thing that we can notice here is that we have a common factor in the numerator. We can factor out secant, so it's going to be secant t, and inside we would have tan t plus secant t. Sorry about that, I forgot the t over here. And you would notice that we can cancel out the numerator, this part, with the denominator, right? It's the same thing. So all we left here is just secant minus cosine t, and that's it. So let me just erase everything out and just include this part. So don't forget to simplify, or else if you would have squared that, I don't even think that was possible to square it, you would have not done this question, or you wouldn't be able to do this question. And now we just need to find the square, so it's going to be square here and then square. Now let's use the formula. So I'm going to do the radical part first, and here the y prime squared is simply going to be, let me just write it quickly, so negative sine t and then square it, so it's going to be sine t squared. So now let's simplify our radical. It's going to be radical of sine squared t plus secant, and actually one thing that I forgot to do here is that we need to open these brackets up for x prime squared. So let's do that first before doing anything else. This is going to be equal to a squared, which is secant squared, minus 2ab, so minus secant cosine t plus cosine t squared. Now one thing here again you can notice is that we have 2 secant multiplied by cosine. What is secant? Secant is simply, secant t is simply 1 over cosine t. So here it is as if you're writing multiplied by 1 over cosine t, which we can just cancel these, right? So the cosine and the secant just cancels out, and here we are left with just minus 2 plus cosine t, and this is our x prime squared, the final thing. Now let's write y prime squared was what was it, sine squared. Now let's write the final radical, so it's going to be radical sine squared t plus cosine squared, oh I forgot the square over here, so cosine squared plus secant squared t minus 2, and here the secant the sine squared t plus the cosine squared t is going to cancel out, it's equal to 1, and we have a minus 2 over here, so that is going to be just simply minus 1. So all we left here is secant squared t minus 1. So let me just write that again, secant squared t minus 1. Now if you remember this, secant squared t minus 1 is a identity which is equal to tan squared t. So if you remember your identities, secant squared t minus 1 is equal to tan squared t. So now this is pretty straightforward. This is equal to tan t, and now let's write the final integration or integral. It's going to be from 0 to pi over 3 of 2 pi, and we need a y over here, so the function itself, cosine t and multiplied by tan t dt. Now again, what is tan t? Tan t, or tan, is simply sine over cosine, right? So if we substitute, instead of tan t over here, replace it with sine over cosine, this is going to cancel out the cosine, and all we're going to be left with is just sine t. So again, we are left here with only sine t and dt. So now this is pretty straightforward. Just integrate this. So I'm going to take 2 pi outside, limits from 0 to pi over 3, and this is going to be negative cosine t, and the final answer that you would get is pi. So that's it for this video. Another important thing that you need to note is that what axis are you rotating. So let's say if this was y-axis, then in your formula you would use f of prime, fx, the function, as x here. So x here is this entire thing. So just keep that in mind and don't make that silly mistake. And as always, I do have a shortcut method for you guys for this type of question. So you need a calculator with the integration option, and you need to solve until you have x prime squared and y prime squared. So once you have that, let me just erase and make some space. And obviously this is after doing all your working and getting the final answer. So let's say I want to recheck my answer, and we have the answer of pi, right? So let me just erase everything except that. So let me just do this and remove this. So the final integration would be from 0 to pi over 3 of 2 pi, and then we have the the x-axis, right? So x-axis is going to be cosine t, and then we have the integration from secant t minus cosine t squared outside plus sine squared t. So you just type this on the calculator, and if you get pi, that means your answer is right. So let me just type that out, and I just typed everything on the calculator as is, and we got the same exact answer as pi. Now another important thing that you would have to set your calculator is that you need to change the type to radiant, and the way to do that is, normally it is in degrees, and you need to change it to radiant whenever you're doing these type of rechecking. So the way to do that is shift and then click on menu to go to setup, and then you would go to angle unit is the second option for me, and there you can see that you have number 1 as degree, number 2 as radiant, and number 3 as gradient. So that's all for this video. I hope that you understood this topic, and if you have any questions about anything, feel free to ask in the comment section. I'll be more than happy to help. And thanks for watching as always. I'll see you on the next one.